Thank you so much, Mark. Um, I don't know about you, but I have already had a very long morning. My 9.5-year-old daughter announced this morning that she knows that the tooth fairy does not exist and the jig is up. So it's been a very tender morning here in our home. And I would love to start with a little bit of practice before I do a short teaching, and then we'll do more practice again. That's the flight plan for this morning, as I feel that my heart needs it. So in this week's Torah portion in Shoftim, there's a verse that says, Tamim tihiyeh im Adonai Elohecha. Be wholehearted with Yud He Vav He, your God. So why don't we begin with just a few minutes of grounding in our bodies and checking in with our hearts, whatever may be on your heart this morning. I invite you to bring some awareness to your feet, perhaps your feet that are touching the earth beneath you. I invite you to close your eyes if that feels at ease, or keep them open with just a soft gaze a few feet ahead of you. And really, the way I like to begin my practice is by feeling into the body being held and supported. So perhaps the chair, the seat below you, just feeling into the possibility of allowing the weight of the body to rest in the embrace of gravity, of being held. I invite you to bring gentle awareness to the body as it breathes itself. Noticing where you feel the inhale most prominently, perhaps at the nostrils or in the back of your throat. And if you find it difficult to connect with this sensation of breath, you might choose to place one hand on your chest or a hand on your belly and simply connect with the rise and fall, or the expansion and contraction of the body as it breathes. With this embodied presence, you might choose to pay attention to this miraculous aliveness, the organs, the three-dimensional structures of the torso, inviting the body to soften, to release whatever tension you may be holding as much as the body will allow. And you might bring this verse of being wholehearted with Adonai, with Yud He Vav He, coming into wholeheartedness in this moment, coming into presence. Holding that verse as the intention to return to back each time the to-do list pops up or your thoughts begin to run off in a story. Simply coming into wholeheartedness. Hineni, in this moment, here I am. You might choose to listen to the heart. If you might ask the heart a question, what is the prayer of my heart today? What is the prayer of my heart in this moment? Perhaps together we might listen with the intention of hearing our heart's prayer. Maybe it is a prayer for strength, for healing, for calm, for letting go. Whatever it may be, just allowing the spaciousness and the time, the slow time to hear what is on your heart right now. When we listen deeply, we might learn that our body, our heart, they know. There's a deep wisdom if we only give it the space and the time to hear. I invite you to come back into our shared space for just a few minutes as we set another intention for our final practice. And we are in the month of Elul. It's such a special time. We're also really exploring the intention of release for this coming year, as this is sort of the macro Shabbat. So every week we celebrate Shabbat on the seventh day, and every seventh year we celebrate what is called Shemitah, the release of our fields. The Israelites would allow the fields to lay fallow in order to rejuvenate, not to abandon the fields, but to give them time to recover in the service of returning back to the fields in order to sow and reap and harvest. And so we're exploring these themes and figuring out how can we include them in our Jewish mindfulness practice, how can we make sense of them in our contemporary lives, and how we can approach this coming year, this year of Shemitah, from a perspective of spiritual growth. And what is it that we need to release this year? What is it that we need to do differently this year as we come into this macro Shabbat, this year of Shabbat, really, year of rest? And I feel like there were so many things that went wrong in the last 18 months during the pandemic. And yet there were so many lessons that we also learned, ways to slow down. We were forced to slow down. Perhaps this year we can think of ways that we can be more intentional of slowing down, things that we want to retain from what we learned from this enforced kind of settling into our homes, settling into our spaces, settling into our bodies. So that is the theme for the teaching this week and for the next few weeks in the month of Elul. And I also want to bring in a little story that you may have heard. Oftentimes I find that we tell the same stories year after year, and we relate to them in different ways depending on where we are in our lives. So the time of Elul, the time of this month in which the very word Elul can be seen as the acronym for Ani ledodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, from Shir HaShirim, from Song of Songs. It's about a time in which we reconnect with the relationship. Now, Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, is on a pshat level, on the surface level, can be seen as a poem between that, a conversation between a shepherd and a maiden, two beloveds talking to each other. But it can also be a conversation between the human being and the divine in love, in connection, in that special relationship of relaxed time together. And so one of the stories is, you may have heard someone say, oh, the time of Elul is it's the time when the king is in the field. Well, what does that mean? The king is in the field. And so the story goes that in olden times, the monarch, the king, would every once in a while come to the field to see the farmers, to visit the farmers as they were harvesting their crops, to see what was happening in the field. And this was a period of time when the farmers can approach the king as an equal, when the farmers can approach the king on their terms, not with the pomp and circumstance of the palace, not at an appointed time, in special dress, with very specific ways of addressing the king in a formal way. But when the king came to the field, they can speak with the king like friends, like equals. And so the story goes that the month of Elul is that time when we have the opportunity to practice before we get to the palace, before we get to the intense liturgy of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, before we get to the ritualized, the highly ritualized and protocol of our holidays, we can simply be in a relaxed conversation, one that is deeply individual, one in which we can listen to our heart and have the time and the opportunity to say, okay, I know that I'm about to say all these words of my prayer book, all of these formulas of my prayer book. There's an entire book just for Yom Kippur. But even on Shabbat, when we come to Shabbat services, it could take us hours to say each prayer, all of the prayers, if we were to really be intentional. But what if we took the time to listen to our hearts and find out, what is the prayer on our heart? What if we were to speak to the divine as if we were simply meeting in the field, not in the palace, not with the protocols, not beautifully dressed, but just as we are, doing our thing, our everyday thing? What an amazing gift. And I also really like to approach this time that perhaps we also have this time not only to invite the king out of the palace, but also to invite our hearts, our own souls, out of the fortresses that we have built around our hearts, right? So much of our time, so much of our mundane experience is spent in a posture of defensiveness, is spent in a posture of us against the world. And so we protect our hearts. We hold ourselves in. We don't allow the truth of our hearts to speak freely. Perhaps not only are we inviting the king to play with us in the field, to simply be with us in the field, but we're also inviting our hearts, our souls, to come into the field and be at ease. And really, this is a time in which we have the opportunity to know what is on our heart individually, because later on, we will be in community. We will be speaking as a community. It is a time when we say, Shema Kolenu, hear our voices. We say this in the Amidah, Shema Kolenu, hear our voices. Well, let us find out, what does the voice say? What does our heart say? So I invite you to come back into your posture for meditation. And I will say that most of my own practice is about breath, is about finding the breath in the body. And there's nothing like an upper respiratory virus to really understand how not to take the breath for granted. So my kids came home from camp a few weeks ago and were under the weather. And of course, I also caught whatever they had. And so for the last 10 days, I've had to shift my practice away from breath and toward listening, knowing that the breath is not always accessible. Sometimes the breath is constricted. Sometimes we deal with viruses. Sometimes we deal with allergies, laryngitis. My voice is just returning to me. Sometimes we deal with having to change and be flexible, right? So the breath is not the only anchor that we might use for our meditation. You might listen with the ears, simply allowing the sense of hearing to be your anchor, to be your place of return over and over again, opening the ears without reaching, but in a relaxed way, simply allowing for sound to reach you. You might listen to the sound of my voice, or you might simply place my voice to the background and listen to the sounds far away or nearby. Listen to their quality. Perhaps listen to the sounds outside of your space, outside of your room. See how far you can hear. Allow for your awareness, your consciousness to expand toward sound. We'll sit here, Hineni, with wholeheartedness, listening both to the sounds all around us and also opening to the possibility that we might hear the prayer of our heart, that we might know what the body needs right now. Come out to the field and speak with ease. Shma Kolenu. Shma Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Hus Verachem Aleinu. Hear our voice and have compassion for us. Vekabel, berachamim uvratzon et tefilatenu. Return us to you, and we will return. Renew our days. Hashivenu. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. Return us to you. Al tashlichenu. Do not turn us away. Here we are. Let us sit in silence without words, simply listening. As we close our practice together, I want to share a chant with you, one of my favorites. In English, it means Purify my heart so that I may serve you with truth. Taher libeinu, Taher libeinu, Taher libeinu leavtecha be'emet. Taher libeinu, Taher libeinu, Taher libeinu leavtecha be'emet. Purify our hearts in the service of you. We acknowledge in this year of Shemitah, this coming year of Shemitah, that we are so deeply interconnected and that we practice not only for the benefit of our own spiritual growth, but for the benefit of our loved ones, our communities, and the world at large that can surely use more compassion. And I invite one of our friends, Rich, I believe it's Richard, who is blowing the shofar today. The shofar is a symbol of waking up to the truth of this moment, to the emet of this moment. And we can continue with our listening meditation by listening to the cry of the shofar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much, Marita. Friends, we seal our practice as we do by offering those in mourning, observing yard sites, an opportunity to recite the Kaddish with the support of everyone here, loving presence, and inviting those who are saying Kaddish. If you'd like to put the name or names of those you're honoring today in the chat box now or after we recite Kaddish, and invite you to join me in rising body and supporting spirit. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yamad, Yibrach, Yalif, Malchute, V'chayechon, V'yonechon, V'chayei, T'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Zman Karim, Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Barak, L'olam,
Amen.
Barak,
Barak,
Yitmam, Yitmaseh, Yitadar, Yitadar, Shnei Kushav, Yichud, La'ela, Birchata, Shirata, Shvachata, Nechmata, Amiran, Ba'alma, Be'eru, Amen.
Yehi
Shlama Rabba, B'Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'Yachol Yisrael, Be'eru, Amen. Aseh Shalom B'Mamad, Aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Yachol Yisrael, V'Yachol Yoshvei Tevel.
Amen.
Amen.
Shabbos to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Marita Anderson for once again leading us so beautifully in practice today, and to Richard Shiner for being our Ba'al Tekiah, blowing the shofar, and thanks to Catherine Fisher for sponsoring our practice today in honor of your husband Richard and your double chai wedding anniversary, Catherine. Many more in good health and joy and blessings. Just to let people know, next week, we'll put in the list in the chat box our leaders for next week. Wonderful group once again. Rabbi Shuli Passel on Monday, Rabbi Miriam Klotz on Tuesday, Cantor Julie Newman on Wednesday, Rabbi Sam Feinsmith back to lead us on Thursday, Cantor Heather Batchelor to lead us into Shabbat next Friday. the second week of the Shofar Project. And just a reminder to be on the lookout if you signed up, as I hope you did. Sunday morning, the first day of the second week of Elul, you'll receive the framing essay for the practice for the week. So please do look out for that. If you have a partner or a practice partner, it's wonderful to use that as a tool to study together and to share the reflection questions, your responses to the reflection questions together. And thanks to Tamar Yanai, who is filling in today to hold our tech space so beautifully, as Adi Stein is in Israel for some time, be back next week, in the middle of the week, I believe. So wishing you all Shabbat Shalom, and for those who are able and willing and interested in staying on for a few minutes of conversation with Marita about today's teaching, you're welcome to do so. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box, preface it with the word question, all in caps, and I'll keep an eye on that. Marita, thank you, as always. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
So I really appreciated your bringing in a theme which has not been the predominant theme this week, but of course we're in the season of Tshuva, Elul. We're looking ahead to the high holidays and to the liturgy of the high holidays. Really appreciated you bringing some of that liturgy in, especially Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu V'nashuva, turn us, God, and we will return. And I was thinking about the intersection of Shemitah, of what we've been talking about this week, and Shemitah and Tshuva. How do we use Shemitah as a practice in service of our turning or returning to God? And I just like as that came up for me, I'll share what came up for me. I had this sense of we think about, we need to do tshuva, we need to make tshuva, we need to turn towards God, we need to, and all of that involves effort. And if Shemitah is about letting go of effort and trusting that if we let go of effort, you put it in, I think, really beautifully. I don't remember exact words, but I had a sense of, our authentic self will emerge, who we really are, wholehearted self will emerge if we don't work so hard at it. If we let ourselves not have to think, we have to make it happen. I had the image of, dear friend of mine and beloved friend of others on this sit, Mickey Young, described the midah of trust, bitachon, as what we learn in our bodies when we lie on our back to float. How you do a back float, and if you're flailing around, you start sinking. But if you actually lie back and just trust the process, it will hold us up. So I extended that to and the current will carry us where we need to go. Trusting the current will carry us where we need to go. So the Hashivenu, just like the Hashivenu, which is God, it's a prayer for God to turn us. We don't have to turn. God, please turn us, turn me, and let me return. Let us return. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Or maybe you have some other thoughts about how Shemitah and Tshuva intersect. I don't know. Comes up for you.
Well, one of the things that came up for me as you were speaking, I'm very much a visual person, and this aspect of being in the field or allowing for the field to lay fallow, or meeting out in the field with the purpose of relationship as opposed to work, right? There's so much playfulness to that. And one of my teachers, and actually one of my spiritual directors, is Rabbi Shefa Gold, and she has said something like, Israel has often, the word Israel has often been translated as, one who wrestles with God, but it could also be one who dances with God. And so I would like to imagine that my return, if I'm really intentional about the Shemitah practice this year, that perhaps my return to God, return to essence this year will be about dancing with as opposed to wrestling with. And that's a different quality of experience. And I feel like so much of my days is spent calibrating my panic button. It's like I have this panic button and I don't quite know where it's supposed to be. And I feel like, a lot of my day is spent trying to figure out, like, is this worth panicking over? Is this not worth panicking over? And one of the things that I'm yearning for is joy. One of the things that I'm really, really yearning for is that kind of relaxation, right? And what a gift to us if we say, yes, all of that is true. Your difficulties are here, and yet there is not only permission but encouragement to be playful, to come out and dance, to be in the field with the idea of a relaxed experience. Then I don't feel so guilty about leaving my panic button alone, and just kind of stepping away from it. I don't have to be so close to it all the time.
That's really lovely. That's really lovely. And when you were talking about, reinterpreting Yisrael as dancing with God, which is just, there's a gem right there. I was thinking about, letting God lead there too, like, right? Just let ourselves be led. And also when you're talking about the panic button, I mean, I'm sure every one of us can relate to that. What occurred to me is also one other manifestation of Shemitah practice is this letting go of, the panic, can be either, am I catastrophizing, or is this really something, or is this a real catastrophe, right? I better pay attention to. And to some extent, we, practicing tempering that, noticing, first of all, the panic button. Oh, I'm tempting to hit the panic button, and to use that in the moment as an opportunity to release the outcome, let go of the outcome, to surrender that, what if this year I just tried to do that a little bit more, we're in all these places where I suddenly, I freak out about this or that. It's like, what if I just try to freak out a little bit less, Diana, that, there you go. That's enough. That's enough for this year.
Yeah, I actually, from this week's tour, if I might add something to that, and actually Anna Satinstein just posted a beloved Rumi poem, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There's a field, I'll meet you there.
Right.
That is the perfect poem.
Perfect.
Thank you for including that. That's Rumi, and very much part of my imagination when I'm thinking about that field. So in this week's Torah portion, there is a couple of verses of what happens during wartime and like the people who can be sent home during time of conflict. And they're sent home not to abandon the troops, but essentially to provide, sustenance to the troops in a different way. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it's like, if you haven't sown your fields yet, or like if you haven't dedicated your vineyard yet, if you're fianced but you haven't had the, you're in the first year of marriage. I may be confusing things a little bit, but there's a list of things that would essentially exempt you from having to fight. And the last one is, if you're afraid, if your heart is not steady.
Right.
And I find that the thing that my intention right now in this crazy time is asking the question, is what I'm doing in the service of steadying my heart? Because if my heart is not steady, I might affect everyone. I might have an effect on everyone around me. And vice versa. If my heart is steady, it could help everyone around me. Right. So it's like we can learn from the reason why I focus on the heart today. Right. My focus was on what is my heart saying? Can I soften? Excuse me. It's this. My breath is not quite accessible today. Can my heart be pure enough and steady enough to have a calming effect on me and everyone around me? And if not, what, do I need to go home? Am I in this, or do I need to like check out for a little bit and take care of myself? Because our hearts have an impact on our communities, on our families, on our loved ones, on the world. And there's no shame in having, an unsteady heart. But I do like to have a practice in place that asks that question. Is what I'm doing in this moment in service of steadying my heart? And if the answer is no, I've got to figure out what do I need in this moment? Do I need more rest? Do I need to call a friend? Do I need to ask for help? Have I eaten yet? There are ways that I can bolster myself and sustain my heart. Have I prayed? Have I had time to listen? Have I had time to sit in silence? Have I given myself spaciousness? Have I touched my beloved? Have I had intimacy, right? So there are so many ways in which we have spiritual medicine that helps our hearts remain steady. And it's a constant, I think it's a constant play with listening, awareness, responding with wisdom. What does my heart need in this moment?
Yeah. There's a question about, and it's true, there is a tradition about that when we take a step or turn towards God, that God will meet us in terms of the process of tshuva. And so, yeah, that's what was occurring to me about thinking about Shemitah, is about that. It's a beautiful expression of it. Could Shemitah be the place of release, the field where we allow for and receive tshuva, which is an interesting thing for everyone, for all of us to consider about whether tshuva is a process that is at work, and it's also rabbinically described as one of the things that pre-existed the creation of the world. That it's which I take to mean it's innate in the fabric of the cosmos. There is a gravitational pull back home. If we can let ourselves attune to that and give ourselves over to that, that can happen. So we can apply our Shemitah practice that way. Also, I just want to end by commiserating about the tooth fairy, Marita.
Oh my God, so hard.
And we really should have, and I want to apologize that we didn't insert a spoiler alert before you said that, in case there are people on the sit who, you kind of like really ruined their day now too.
Sorry.
That's okay. When there's more time, I'd love to share a story about a 16-year-old teenager in my old synagogue who wrote a beautiful spiritual autobiography about coming back to believe in this tooth fairy as a 16-year-old after having had the myth shattered and discovering and reclaiming the myth, which I think is in many ways what we learn to do. When we take the Jewish path seriously, is what we come to do. It's like what Rabbi Neil Gilman called second naivete, which is to say, if the story's not over yet, yes, the tooth fairy may or may not be you, but that does not mean that there's no reason to believe in the tooth fairy. So may that happen.
Yeah, the world is a much more wondrous, magical place when we hold on to our beliefs in the tooth fairy.
Yeah.
It was a hard day today.
Sorry, but I bet you've been a great tooth fairy. So may that lay a foundation for strong belief. Okay. Anyway, thanks again so much as always, and thanks so much, Catherine. Thanks to Tamar, and most of all, thanks to all of you. We hope to see you back on Monday to practice with Rabbi Shuli Passow, and wish you all a sweet and restorative and Shemitah-filled Shabbat.